So many people have been asking me about thyroid health recently, and I realise even though it's something I deal with probably every day when I'm working, it's not actually something I often talk about. I talk a lot about estrogen and progesterone and testosterone and adrenals, but very rarely talk about the thyroid. I thought I'd do a few videos about thyroid health. The thyroid is a small gland that sits in front of your neck, and it produces hormones that generally help with things like energy, mood, and weight. And it is a very small but very important gland. Now, you can do testing for your thyroid. I pause because testing shouldn't be complicated, but it often ends up being complicated because not all the tests I would like to see are always available on the NHS. The first hormone that pretty much is always tested by the NHS is something called thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH. And this is the signal from the brain, the pituitary, that tells the thyroid to work. Now, this test is a bit different to a lot of other tests because normally if you have a test and it's like at the top end of the range, that's a good thing. It means it's working well. But for the TSH, because it's to do with the feedback loop of then how many thyroid hormones are in the blood, so TSH is released, it tells the thyroid to work. The thyroid makes hormones, and then the TSH should be lower, should be on the lower end of the range. But if there aren't enough thyroid hormones being detected, then the TSH gets higher and higher to try and stimulate the thyroid to make more hormones. In an ideal world, you want to see a lower TSH at the lower end of the range. And the range often, with most labs, is up to around 4 point something, maybe 4.3, maybe 4.5. Optimum, I would say, would be below 2. Everyone tests that privately and on the NHS. The next hormone that is often tested also on the NHS is your free thyroxine hormone. This is also known as the T4 hormone. Thyroxine is one of the important hormones that the thyroid produces. So this is often tested. The range can be anywhere between 9 and 12 on the lower end and up to about 22 on the higher end, depending on your lab. Now, for this hormone, you would want it to be maybe more in the higher end of the range, or at least in the sort of more than halfway of the range, I would say, at least. Now, this hormone is not tested very often, the free T3 hormone. And I think that that's a shame because it is very useful. You see, you can have a very good T4 level, but T4 isn't as active in the blood. The more active thyroid hormone is your free T3. You might have a great T4, a great TSH, but you don't feel great. And perhaps your T4 is not converting into T3 because that's what has to happen. Some people don't do that well genetically. And yeah, if your T3 is low, even though your T4 is great, you may not feel that good. That's an important hormone to get checked. But the T3 can be active or inactive. Then it would be useful to check a hormone called reverse T3, which is kind of like your inactive T3. Because if you've got a ton of that, even though you've got a good free T3, you may not feel great. It's a bit more complicated than it sounded initially, right? And then I also like to check thyroid autoantibodies, especially thyroid peroxidase and thyroglobulin. And these are autoantibodies that your immune system can produce. And essentially, it then blocks your thyroid from working that effectively. I think that's a useful test because if that's elevated, that shows that your thyroid is struggling to make hormones. It's putting extra strain on your thyroid. And say if that strain continues for years and years and years and years, you may end up with hypothyroidism. We need to look at what can we do to reduce those antibodies. I hope that's helpful around thyroid testing. And the next video will be about how you treat the thyroid.